The waitress was his obsession, until one night, she made him hers. He had power, reputation, and wealth, but the one thing Ethan Cole could never buy was peace. The city glittered beneath his penthouse window, but every light only reminded him how alone he was at the top. Down below, in a quiet corner of Manhattan, Lucy Hart wiped down the last table at her small restaurant. The neon sign outside flickered, painting her tired face in pink and gold. She thought she was closing for the night until the doorbell chimed and he walked in. The man who had never waited for anyone stood there, his suit damp from the drizzle, his tie loosened, eyes unreadable. "We are closed," she said softly, stacking menus. "Not for me," he answered, his voice low, controlled, a mix of exhaustion and command. She recognized him instantly, Ethan Cole, the hospitality tycoon whose face appeared on magazines she used as coasters. She had served him once, months ago, when he had come with investors and had barely looked at her. But tonight his gaze did not move away. "I need a favor," he said, sliding into the corner booth like a man used to being obeyed. Lucy crossed her arms. "You have an empire. What could you possibly need from me?" He took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything. "Be my fiancée for 6 weeks." She blinked. "Excuse me?" Ethan leaned forward. "It is not a joke. My ex is spreading rumors that I am unstable, that my company is collapsing. The board is nervous. I need someone real by my side, someone the press will believe." Lucy let out a nervous laugh. "So you came to a diner to find a fake girlfriend?" His reply was simple, almost cold. "I came here because you are the only person who ever told me no." Silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. She glanced at his hand as he opened a folder and slid a check toward her. Her breath caught when she saw the amount enough to pay her brother's medical debt and keep their apartment for a year. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you do not want anything from me," he said. "And that is exactly what I need." Her pulse quickened. Every instinct told her to walk away, yet something about his eyes, tired, lonely, human, made her stay. "You do realize how insane this sounds?" "Completely," he said. And for the first time, there was a flicker of humor in his voice. "But I am very persuasive." Lucy hesitated. The world outside was still wet and cruel, and she had been fighting too long to keep her family from drowning. One signature could change everything. She sat down across from him, her reflection trembling in the glass window. "All right," she whispered. "Tell me the rules." Ethan exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath for years. "Rule 1, he said, no falling in love." She gave him a small, ironic smile. "Rule 2, she replied, no pretending this is normal." For the first time in a long time, he smiled, real, unguarded. It was not a deal anymore. It was the beginning of something that neither of them could control. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, soft and distant. Two strangers sat across from each other, unaware that their contract would soon become a confession. Have you ever made a choice that felt wrong but somehow right at the same time? Comment yes if you want to know what happens when a fake engagement turns into something real. And now, let us go back to where it all began, with our main characters, Ethan and Lucy. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. Lucy had signed the contract, but the ink on her name felt heavier than any paper she had ever touched. When she left the diner that night, the city was silent except for the rain tapping against her umbrella. Ethan's words kept echoing in her mind, cold but oddly sincere. By morning, her life no longer belonged only to her. The following day, a sleek black car waited outside her apartment building. A driver opened the door, and Lucy slid into the back seat, her worn sneakers brushing against the expensive leather. She looked out the window as Manhattan blurred past. "What am I doing?" she whispered. The car stopped in front of a glass tower that touched the clouds, the headquarters of Cole Hospitality Group. Inside, everything smelled of coffee and ambition. Assistants hurried through marble halls, eyes wide when they saw her. They must have wondered who the waitress in the thrift store jacket was. Ethan was waiting in his office, framed by the city skyline, as calm and perfect as ever. "Good morning, Miss Hart," he said. "I hope you slept well. We have much to do." She wanted to laugh. He sounded like he was onboarding an employee, not hiring a fake fiancé. "Do we start with the acting lessons? Or the lies? She asked. Ethan almost smiled. Both, he said, handing her a folder. Inside were photographs, details of his schedule, and a script of questions the media might ask. You will accompany me to the charity gala Friday night. I need you to look the part. The next few days passed like a dream she was not sure she wanted to wake up from. Designers arrived with racks of dresses. A stylist hovered around her, adjusting hems, brushing curls from her face. You have good posture, the woman said. Keep your chin up. You are about to walk into a room full of people who think they own the world. Lucy looked at her reflection, same freckles, same eyes, but something had changed. She looked capable. Ethan observed from across the room, hands in his pockets, quiet but watching every movement. When their eyes met, she felt an unfamiliar warmth run through her chest. By the evening of the gala, the city glimmered under golden light. The ballroom of the street Regis was crowded with the kind of people Lucy had only seen on television. Cameras flashed as Ethan guided her down the marble staircase, his hand resting lightly on her back. Every step felt unreal, yet his touch steadied her. Whispers followed them like wind. Who is she? The new fiancé? Impossible. Lucy forced a smile, pretending she belonged. At the center of the room, Vivian Shaw, Ethan's ex, turned toward them, her red gown catching every flash. Well, Vivian said, her voice sweet but sharp, you did not waste time, Ethan. Lucy's throat tightened, but she kept her tone calm. He told me waiting is overrated. A few guests laughed softly. Even Ethan's lips curved for a second. Vivian's eyes narrowed. The game had begun. Hours later, after endless smiles and photographs, Lucy escaped to the balcony for air. The night was cool and smelled of rain again. Ethan joined her, his tie loosened, the mask of control slipping slightly. You handled yourself well tonight, he said, better than most people in this room. She turned toward him. Do you compliment all your employees, or am I special? He looked at her, really looked, and for a heartbeat, the distance between them disappeared. You are not my employee, he said quietly. At least I do not want you to be. The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. She felt her heart stutter, unsure if it was fear or something else. Before she could speak, his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He answered with a clipped tone, his voice turning cold again. Yes, I will handle it. When he hung up, the warmth between them was gone, replaced by silence. Lucy looked out over the city lights, her pulse still racing. She had agreed to play a role, but she had not expected to feel the script slipping away. Somewhere between the rules and the rehearsals, something real had started to stir, and that terrified her more than any lie. Ethan glanced at her one last time before walking back inside, the door closing softly behind him. The night wind brushed against her skin, and for the first time, Lucy realized the contract was not the only thing binding her to him now. It was something far more dangerous: curiosity. The morning after the gala, the city was still half asleep, but the world around Ethan Cole was already spinning. The newspapers hit the newsstands before sunrise, their glossy covers showing him and Lucy descending the staircase, his hand on her back, her smile bright but mysterious. The headline read, Ethan Cole's secret fiancée, who is she? He stared at the photo in silence while his assistant, nervously flipping through her tablet, whispered, It is everywhere, sir. Social media, finance blogs, even gossip shows. Ethan set the paper down and said calmly, Good, let them talk. But behind the composed tone, something restless was moving inside him. Lucy, on the other hand, woke up to chaos in her inbox. Dozens of messages from friends, former co-workers, and even her landlord flooded her phone. Some congratulated her, some accused her of lying. One message from her brother simply said, Lucy, is this true? She sat on her bed, the morning sun spilling across the floor, and typed back, It is complicated. At that exact moment, a knock came at her door. Ethan's driver stood outside with a bouquet of white lilies and a note. Press conference at noon. Wear blue. Trust me, EC. She sighed. Trust you, she muttered. That is the hardest part. By noon, she stood beside him at the Cole Hospitality headquarters. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. Ethan spoke first, every word measured, confident. Yes, Lucy Hart and I are engaged, he said. Our relationship may surprise some of you, but sometimes the best things in life are not planned. The crowd erupted in questions. When is the wedding? How did you meet? Is this real? Or another publicity stunt? Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Lucy stepped up. "We met the way ordinary people do by accident," she said, her voice steady, soft but firm. "And yes, it is real enough to make both of us nervous." The room fell quiet. She looked at Ethan briefly, her heart pounding, and he met her eyes with something almost like gratitude. Afterward, in the elevator ride down, the tension broke. "You were not supposed to speak," he said quietly. Lucy crossed her arms. "You were not supposed to lie so easily." He turned to her, voice low. That was not a lie. The words lingered as the elevator doors opened. She walked out first, leaving him standing there, unsure for the first time in years how to control the situation. The days that followed blurred into a strange new rhythm. They attended meetings, photo shoots, charity lunches, always side by side, always pretending. But somewhere in the pretending, something true began to bloom. Ethan started noticing the little things. The way Lucy laughed under her breath when she thought no one was listening. How she always saved the last piece of dessert for someone else. How she refused to let anyone talk down to the waitstaff at events. She carried herself with quiet dignity, and it disarmed him. One evening, after a long meeting, Lucy found Ethan alone in his office, tie undone, the skyline glowing behind him. "You work too much," she said softly. "That is rich coming from someone who just worked 14 hours, pretending to be my fiancé." She smiled. "Maybe we both need a break." He looked up, eyes tired but gentle. "A break?" She nodded. "Dinner, real food, no cameras, no contracts." He hesitated for a moment, then set his phone aside. "All right, Miss Hart, lead the way." They ended up at a tiny Italian restaurant tucked between brownstones in Greenwich Village. The owner greeted Lucy like an old friend, seating them in the back under a string of fairy lights. The smell of garlic and fresh bread filled the air. For the first time, Ethan looked like a man, not a brand. They talked about small things, music, childhood, the places they wanted to see but never had time to visit. When he laughed, it was unguarded, rough around the edges, real. As they walked back to the car, a light rain began to fall. Ethan stopped under the awning and turned to her. "Lucy," he said quietly, "you make it difficult to remember this is pretend." Her breath caught. The world seemed to pause, the streetlights haloing them in gold. "Maybe," she whispered, "it is not pretend anymore." He took a slow breath, his hand half reaching toward her, but then his phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, and the spell shattered. A message from Vivian: "Enjoy your little game while it lasts." His jaw clenched. Without a word, he pocketed the phone and walked ahead. Lucy watched him go, the warmth in her chest turning cold. She did not know it yet, but that message was the beginning of the storm that would test everything between them. The message from Vivian replayed in Ethan's mind long after the night had ended. He had not told Lucy about it, but it lingered between them like smoke. Over the next few days, the mood in his office shifted. Calls grew shorter, his words turned clipped. Lucy noticed it immediately. The man who had once started to open up was now distant again, buried behind his walls of control. She tried to stay professional, but it hurt more than she wanted to admit. By Friday, Ethan had invited her to a charity luncheon at the Metropolitan Hotel, the same place where his company had first launched its flagship project. "It is important," he said simply that morning. "We have investors attending." Lucy had nodded, but his eyes had already moved past her, focused on his phone. On the way to the event, the car ride was silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. She glanced at him once, wanting to ask what was wrong, but something about the tension in his jaw stopped her. When they arrived, photographers were already waiting outside. Flashes burst as Ethan helped her from the car. Inside, the ballroom gleamed with chandeliers and polished marble, every guest perfectly rehearsed in wealth and charm. Vivian was there too, of course, dressed in crimson again, her smile too sharp to be kind. "Lucy," she said, approaching with a champagne glass in hand, "you look radiant. Fame suits you." Lucy smiled politely. "Thank you. It is new to me." Vivian leaned in slightly. "Enjoy it while it lasts. The higher you climb, the longer the fall." Ethan's hand tightened on Lucy's back. "Enough, Vivian," he said quietly. "Not tonight." Vivian tilted her head and smiled sweetly. "Oh, Ethan, it is always tonight with you." Lucy walked away before the argument could grow. She needed air, space, anything to calm the tremor in her chest. In the ladies' lounge, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked like someone else entirely: perfect hair, designer dress, borrowed diamonds. But her eyes were still hers, uncertain and searching. "You are not like them," she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Vivian had cornered Ethan again. "You think this little performance will save you?" she hissed. "The board will see right through her." Ethan straightened his shoulders. "You do not know her." "Oh, but I do," Vivian said, her voice cold. "A waitress from nowhere who will leave you the second you stop paying." The words hit harder than he expected, not because they were cruel, but because they echoed his own hidden fear. For the first time in years, he did not know what was real in his own life. After the luncheon, Ethan and Lucy drove back in silence. The city passed by like a blur of lights and noise, but neither of them spoke. When they reached her apartment, she finally broke the quiet. "You do not trust me, do you?" she asked softly. He turned to her, caught off guard. "This is not about trust," he said. "Then what is it about, Ethan? The contract? Your reputation?" "Because somewhere in this mess, I stopped pretending." He said nothing, jaw clenched, eyes on the dashboard. Lucy shook her head. "You wanted honesty. There it is." She stepped out before he could reply, her heels echoing on the wet pavement. That night, Ethan found himself pacing his office, staring at the city through the rain-streaked glass. Every word she had said replayed in his head. He had spent his entire life building walls to keep people out, and now, for the first time, he wished someone would break through them. He poured himself a drink but never took a sip. The silence was too loud. Across town, Lucy sat on her couch, her dress still on, makeup smudged, phone buzzing with unanswered messages. She wanted to hate him, but all she felt was disappointment, the kind that comes when you expect nothing and still end up hurt. The next morning, headlines exploded again, only this time they were worse. Leaked contract reveals Ethan Cole's fake engagement. The article included screenshots, signatures, and quotes from an anonymous source, Vivian. Lucy's heart sank as she scrolled through the story, her name printed in bold. Within minutes, the phone rang. It was Ethan. "Do not go outside," he said. "Reporters are everywhere." "You knew this would happen," she whispered. "You just did not care." "Lucy, please." "No," she interrupted, voice trembling. "You promised this was real enough to make us nervous, but it was just another deal to you." She hung up before he could answer. Ethan stood in his office, phone still pressed to his ear, the silence that followed heavier than any scandal. Outside, the rain kept falling, and for the first time, he realized the empire he had built meant nothing if he could not protect the one person who had made him feel human again. The next 48 hours were chaos. Reporters crowded outside Lucy's apartment, their voices rising over each other as flashes painted the hallway in harsh white light. She could hear them through the thin walls, shouting questions that cut through her like glass. Was the relationship real? Did he pay you? Are you suing him? She stayed inside, curtains drawn, heart pounding. Every time her phone buzzed, she ignored it. Calls from Ethan, from her brother, from unknown numbers. She turned the ringer off and sat on the floor with her head in her hands. Across town, Ethan's world was also burning. The board demanded answers. Investors wanted distance. Vivian had gone on record, painting herself as the betrayed insider. The leaked contract was everywhere, shared and dissected by strangers who did not know a single truth about it. In one meeting, his lawyer told him quietly, "We can settle this by calling it a misunderstanding, admit it was staged, issue a statement, and move on." Ethan looked out the window at the skyline he had once conquered. "And what about her?" he asked. The lawyer hesitated. "She will be fine in time. Public attention fades." Ethan shook his head. "It should have been me," he said. "I built this. I dragged her into it." That night, he stood in front of his mirror, staring at the man reflected there. He looked successful, unshaken, invincible. But beneath the surface, he saw the cracks, the exhaustion, the guilt, the loneliness that had followed him his entire life. For years, he had believed control was safety. Now he understood it was just another kind of cage. Meanwhile, Lucy packed a small bag and left through the back stairwell of her apartment. She walked for blocks through the cold night until she reached a small coffee shop on the edge of Brooklyn. The owner, an older woman named Maria, recognized her instantly. "You poor thing," Maria said gently. "You can stay upstairs for a while. No one will bother you here." Lucy smiled weakly. "Thank you. I just need a few days to breathe." Days passed quietly. She washed dishes in exchange for a room, helped wipe tables, and stayed out of sight. Each night, she read the same message draft on her phone, Ethan's number still at the top, but she could never bring herself to hit send. There were too many things left unsaid, and every word felt either too small or too late. Ethan, however, was not done fighting. When the board called another emergency meeting to discuss his removal as CEO, he finally snapped. He stood before them, the contract file in his hand, and said, "You want the truth? The engagement began as a deal, yes. But what none of you seem to understand is that she kept this company from collapsing. Not by lying, but by reminding me what honesty looks like." The room was silent. If you think a man should be punished for learning what integrity means, then by all means, take it. Take the company. But I will not take part in destroying someone innocent just to protect my name. He walked out before anyone could respond. By the time he reached the street, rain had begun to fall again. He got into his car and drove without a destination, until instinct brought him to the same little diner where everything had begun. The lights were dimmer now, the air quieter. Maria's cafe was just a few blocks away. When he stepped inside, she looked up from behind the counter, startled. "You are looking for her, aren't you?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "She does not want to see you," Maria warned. "Maybe not," he said, "but I need to see her." Upstairs, Lucy sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. She heard footsteps on the stairs and froze. A gentle knock followed. "Lucy," his voice came through, quiet, raw. "Please, open the door." She did not move. "I will not ask for forgiveness," he said. "I just need you to know the truth. I told the board everything. I told them you were the only thing in my life that was not a lie." Her breath caught. Slowly, she opened the door. He looked exhausted, rain-soaked, but his eyes, those guarded blue eyes, were finally unmasked. "I thought loving you was the mistake," he said. "Now I know pretending it was fake was." Lucy said nothing, tears filling her eyes. "I cannot fix what I broke," he continued, "but I can start over if you let me." For a long moment, silence filled the room except for the rain tapping against the window. Then, softly, Lucy whispered, "You cannot buy forgiveness, Ethan. You can only earn it." He nodded. "Then let me start earning." And for the first time in weeks, she let him in. For the first time in weeks, Ethan stayed still. He did not try to talk, to fix, or to defend himself. He simply sat across from Lucy at the small wooden table in Maria's apartment, the same kind of table where she had once wiped crumbs off plates for a living. The air between them was fragile, but not hostile. "So," Lucy finally said, her voice low but steady, "you told the board everything?" Ethan nodded. "Every word. They voted to suspend me indefinitely." "You lost your company," she said quietly. "No," he answered, his eyes soft but certain. "I lost something that was never mine to keep. The company will survive. But I would not if I kept lying." For a while they said nothing more. The rain outside slowed to a soft drizzle. Lucy looked down at her hands. "You think telling the truth fixes everything?" she asked. "No," Ethan said, "but it is a place to start." He hesitated before continuing. "I cannot change how we began, Lucy, but I can change what we become." The honesty in his voice disarmed her. It was no longer the voice of the untouchable CEO, but of a man stripped down to something real. The next morning, Ethan helped Maria serve coffee to early customers while Lucy wiped down tables. The sight of him, sleeves rolled up, quietly working, made her lips curve into something close to a smile. Maria caught her glance and whispered, "Men like that do not come here to play pretend." Lucy did not reply, but she did not deny it either. Over the following days, Ethan stayed. He did not demand forgiveness or pity. He helped with deliveries, repaired the leaky faucet, and paid Maria's overdue rent without announcing it. When Lucy confronted him about it, he shrugged. "I owed the universe a few good deeds." One evening, she found him sitting at the counter, scribbling on a napkin. "Trying to remember how to dream," he said with a small smile. "Turns out it is harder than building skyscrapers." She looked at the napkin. It was a sketch of a new kind of CAF part community center, part job training hub for people starting over. "I was thinking of calling it the second table," he said, "because everyone deserves one." Lucy blinked, emotion welling up in her throat. "You really believe that?" "I do now," he said simply. A week later, Maria's little CAF hosted an open evening for locals. Ethan played piano, badly but sincerely, while Lucy poured coffee and laughed. For the first time in months, The world outside seemed to stop spinning. The news cycle had moved on, Vivian's story had lost its bite, and the storm that had nearly destroyed them was finally fading into memory. But peace never lasts forever. Late that night, as they closed up, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He looked down, frowning. It was a message from his lawyer. Vivian filed a civil suit. She is suing you for defamation. Lucy froze. After everything? Ethan nodded slowly. She is determined to end me. Lucy stepped closer. Then let her try, she said. You told the truth. That is all that matters. It will drag you back into the headlines, he warned. I do not care, she said. I am not running again. The following week, the case became front-page news. Cameras returned, but this time, Ethan and Lucy faced them together. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ethan's statement was brief. The truth may take longer to win, but it always does. We stand by ours. He turned to Lucy, who nodded, her hand finding his. Inside the courtroom, Vivian sat poised and confident, her lawyer delivering accusations about manipulation and fraud. Ethan listened quietly until it was his turn to speak. When he took the stand, he did not defend his empire or reputation. Instead, he said, Yes, I signed a contract, but I fell in love with the person I thought I could never have. That was my mistake and my redemption. A hush fell over the room. Vivian's face hardened, realizing that nothing she said could undo the honesty in his words. When the hearing ended, the press swarmed again. But this time, the questions were different. They were not about scandal, but about forgiveness, second chances, and the strange miracle of truth surviving lies. As Ethan and Lucy left the courthouse hand in hand, the rain had finally stopped, and for the first time, the sky above New York was clear. The future was uncertain, but it was finally theirs to choose. In the weeks that followed the trial, the world began to calm. The lawsuit collapsed under the weight of Vivian's lies, and the court dismissed the case entirely. Her public image crumbled, her allies vanished, and for the first time, the empire of manipulation she had built around Ethan finally fell silent. The victory, however, did not feel like triumph. For Ethan, it felt like release. For Lucy, it felt like peace returning after a long, violent storm. Together they stood outside the courthouse steps. No cameras now, no reporters waiting for blood, just the hum of city traffic and the quiet rhythm of their breathing. Is it really over? Lucy asked, her voice small but hopeful. Ethan looked at her and nodded. It is over, he said softly. At least the part that tried to destroy us. She smiled, the corners of her eyes creasing. And what part comes next? He took her hand gently, his thumb brushing her knuckles. The part we get to write ourselves. That night they returned to Maria's cafe, the place that had unexpectedly become their sanctuary. The lights were dim, and only a few regulars lingered, sipping coffee and trading stories. Maria brought them a pot of tea and winked. On the house, she said. Lucy laughed. You keep saying that, and one day you will be broke. Maria shrugged. Some things are worth more than money. Ethan smiled quietly at that, his gaze resting on Lucy. He had spent years surrounded by people who measured everything in profit and loss. But here, surrounded by laughter and steam from chipped mugs, he felt something he had not felt in a long time: belonging. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lucy began to rebuild not the company, but something entirely different. They rented a small space downtown, a sunlit corner building with peeling paint, and a sign that simply read, "Coming soon, the second table." Lucy designed the interior herself: warm wood, open shelves, a small library corner. Ethan took care of the permits, the finances, and the paperwork. But for once, he did not lead. He followed. "I never knew you were good with tools," Lucy teased one afternoon as he hammered a wooden frame. "I never had a reason to be," he replied, smiling. Until now. As the weeks passed, their project grew. Volunteers came from the community, former employees, local artists, even a few people who had once worked in Ethan's old hotels. They painted walls, hung lights, and donated furniture. The cafe was meant to be a space for people like Lucy once was hardworking, overlooked, searching for a chance. Ethan called it redemption. Lucy called it home. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Lucy stood at the counter, wiping down the last few cups. Ethan approached quietly, slipping an envelope onto the counter. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it," he said. Inside was a document, a partnership certificate bearing both their names. 50-50, he said. No contracts, no clauses, just trust. She looked at him for a long moment. You really think I would sign another deal with you? He smiled, eyes soft. No, I am hoping you will tear it up. She did exactly that, ripping it clean down the middle. Then she leaned across the counter and whispered, "Deal." That night, they stood outside the cafe as the city lights blinked to life. A light wind carried the scent of fresh paint and coffee beans. Ethan looked at Lucy and said quietly, "You once told me I could not buy forgiveness. You were right. But you taught me something better: you earn love by giving it." Lucy looked up at him, the streetlight casting gold in her eyes. "You make it sound simple," she said. "Maybe it is," he answered. The silence that followed was comfortable, the kind that only comes after two people have survived everything meant to break them. Lucy reached for his hand, fingers intertwining with his. For the first time, there were no headlines, no deals, no lies. Just two people standing side by side, building something real from the ruins of what had been false. And as the neon sign flickered to life, the second table, they both knew it was not just a name. It was their story, their second chance, and perhaps the first thing they had ever truly owned together. Months passed, and the second table became more than just a cafe. It became a story that belonged to the whole city. People who had once walked by without a second glance now came inside not just for coffee but for connection. The walls were lined with art donated by local painters. The air carried the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread, and the laughter that filled the space each morning felt like music. Lucy managed the day-to-day work with her usual quiet focus, while Ethan handled the background, the accounting, the community programs, the press inquiries that came flooding in once the story of their cafe spread online. Yet, even as life steadied, something unspoken still lingered between them. Ethan had never said the words. Love, for him, had always been a dangerous thing, a contract with no guarantees. Lucy, patient as ever, did not push. She saw how he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, how he lingered a little longer after closing, how his voice softened when he said her name. She did not need the words yet. She just needed him to stay. One Sunday morning, the cafe hosted a small gathering for the neighborhood musicians, teachers, and families who had been part of the project from the beginning. The little shop was alive with sound and warmth. Lucy stood behind the counter, laughing as a group of children tried to balance muffins on their heads. Ethan watched her from across the room, his chest tightening with something he could no longer deny. Maria, polishing glasses nearby, followed his gaze and said quietly, "If you do not tell her soon, someone else will." Ethan gave a small smile. "You really think so?" "I know so," Maria said. "Women like her do not wait forever." That evening, after everyone had gone home and the cafe lights were dimmed, Lucy locked the front door and turned around to find Ethan still sitting at one of the tables. "We are closed, Mr. Cole," she teased. "Not for me," he said softly. She smiled, remembering the first night they met when he had said those same words. "You know," she said, "you have used that line before." He chuckled. "And it worked then, too." He stood and walked toward her. "Lucy, there is something I have been meaning to say." She raised an eyebrow. "This sounds serious." "It is," he said, his tone dropping to something quieter. "You changed everything I thought I knew about love, about success, about myself. When I met you, I was running an empire built on pride and fear. Now I would trade all of it for one more night like this with you." Lucy froze, her breath catching. "Ethan," she whispered, "you do not have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This is not a contract," he said, opening it slowly. Inside was a simple gold ring, no diamonds, no extravagance, just something honest. "It is a promise. To build something with you, not for you. To wake up next to you, not above you." Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. "Ethan, you do not even like coffee," she said with a shaky laugh. "I like the person who makes it," he said. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Do you remember what I said the night you offered me that fake engagement?" she asked softly. "You said I was insane," he replied. She smiled. "And I still am for saying yes again." He laughed, relief and emotion breaking through all at once, and she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. Outside, the street was quiet except for the low hum of traffic. Inside, Time seemed to stop. Maria peeked from the back doorway, smiling through tears of her own. "About time," she whispered. The lights flickered gently above them, reflecting off the glass sign that read the second table. The words beneath it had been added just last week. A new tagline Lucy had painted herself. It said, "Where second chances become forever." Ethan looked up at it, then down at her, and whispered, "Forever sounds right." Lucy nodded, her voice barely audible. "It does." And with that, under the golden glow of the calf they had built from ruin, they sealed their second beginning with a kiss that finally had no lies left to hide behind. 1 year later, the morning light spilled through the wide windows of the second table, painting the walls in a soft golden hue. The calf was busier than ever, filled with the smell of warm bread and laughter. On the counter stood a small frame that read, "1 year of second chances," surrounded by wildflowers and notes from customers who had found comfort there. Lucy moved gracefully between tables, her apron dusted with flour, her smile easy and unforced. Life had finally settled into something steady, something real. Ethan stood by the doorway, sleeves rolled up, helping a young barista fix the espresso machine. The man who once commanded boardrooms now quietly taught teenagers how to run a register and clean a coffee grinder. When he caught Lucy's eye, he smiled the same quiet smile he had worn the day he proposed, not grand, not performative, but filled with something far deeper. Lucy walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. "The machine is still giving you trouble?" she asked. "Just a loose valve," Ethan said, tightening it with a screwdriver. "Nothing I cannot handle." "I remember when you did not even know how to make a latte," she teased. He looked up at her. "I remember when you did not believe me." She laughed softly. Touch, the bell above the door chimed, and Maria entered, carrying a tray of freshly baked pastries. "Happy anniversary, lovebirds," she said cheerfully. "I brought the cinnamon rolls, the good ones." Lucy hugged her. "Maria, you are supposed to be resting today." "Resting is for the dead," Maria said, waving her off. "And besides, I would not miss this for the world." Ethan set the tray down and looked around the cafe. "You realize this place runs better without me," he said. "That was the goal," Lucy replied. "To make something that can live on its own." She took his hand, her tone softening. "You have done enough, Ethan. You turned guilt into grace. You built something good." He squeezed her hand gently. "We built it." A few minutes later, the cafe door opened again, and a small group of children entered with their art teacher. They carried hand-painted signs and drawings, giggling as they ran to the counter. The teacher smiled apologetically. "They wanted to thank you in person. You funded their art program." Ethan blinked, surprised. "I did not," Lucy interrupted, smiling. "Yes, you did. You just forgot." One of the children handed him a small canvas painted in bright colors. In the center was a cup of coffee with a heart floating in the foam. Beneath it, the words read, "Thank you for giving us our second table." Ethan stared at it for a long moment, his throat tightening. He cleared his voice and whispered, "It is beautiful." Lucy placed a hand on his arm. They just painted what they saw. Later that evening, after the cafe closed, the city outside glowed in a sea of orange lights. Ethan and Lucy sat at their usual corner table, 2 mugs of coffee between them. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. "The suits, the meetings, the power." He thought for a moment before answering. "No," he said. "Power is nothing without peace. And I finally have that." Lucy leaned her head on his shoulder. "So, this is our forever?" "No," he said softly. "This is our now. Forever is what we build every day." They sat there in silence, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, tapping against the glass like an old friend returning home. Ethan stood, walked to the window, and flipped the cafe sign from open to closed. Then he turned back to her. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." Lucy smiled, untied her apron, and took his hand. As they stepped outside into the rain, the neon glow of the second table flickered behind them, its letters shining steady through the mist. It was no longer just a cafe. It was the symbol of everything they had fought for: truth, redemption, and love that had been tested and earned. And as they walked down the quiet street together, hand in hand, the rain washed away the last traces of the past, leaving only the future and the soft echo of 2 hearts that had finally found their way home.